The honourable member for Kenora.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Wow, thank you to my colleagues for the reception. I really appreciate it. And I know that we were all disappointed to learn that the member from Haliburton, Kawartha Lakes Brock's time expired. I know he had much more to contribute, Madam Speaker, but it's an honour for me to be able to rise and speak to such an important topic here this morning. So, as has been highlighted in the discussion thus far, Madam Speaker, we know that food insecurity is a challenge right across the country with inflationary spending from this NDP-Liberal government with their carbon tax adding to the cost of living. People right across the country from coast to coast to coast are struggling to get by, struggling to afford to put food on the table and afford to put healthy food on the table, Madam Speaker, which is an important distinction. It's one thing just to be able to afford some food, but to be able to afford healthy food that and culturally appropriate food in many cases has become a struggle. It's why we've seen, unfortunately, 2 million Canadians that are visiting a food bank in a single month. Every month, 2 million Canadians, if not more, in recent statistics, it might be even higher, are visiting a food bank. 18% of families across the country are reporting food insecurity, Madam Speaker. This is really an affordability crisis across the country. Much of it is of the creation of this NDP-Liberal government with their inflationary policies, with their carbon tax that is a tax on everything, on the farmers that are making the food, on the truckers that are shipping the food, and on the individuals who are buying the food, Madam Speaker. In fact, in 2024, a typical family is going to have to spend $700 more on groceries as a result of this government's policies. But as the report that we're discussing today has highlighted, this is an issue that is even greater in northern communities across the country. And that includes in Northern Ontario and in communities that I represent in the Northwest. Madam Speaker, there are 42 First Nations in my district that I represent, many that have no year-round road access, Madam Speaker. So it becomes a challenge in terms of being able to deliver goods to those communities, especially food and healthy food that doesn't have a long shelf life, Madam Speaker. So communities in the north, what are they relying on? They're relying on winter roads, which are not always predictable, depending on the weather that you're getting. They're relying on a barge to go around from the northeast, around the corner to northwest Ontario. They're relying on aircraft, which of course with the carbon tax and with the so-called clean fuel regulations, the second carbon tax on top of it, it's getting more and more expensive to operate aircraft as well, Madam Speaker. Not to mention the pilot shortage. We could go on and on the issues that this government has created, but it all adds to the added cost of living for northern communities. And then we look, of course, further north to the territories, where I understand there aren't many road access to communities. We see that those rates of food insecurity even higher, Madam Speaker, according to a report put together with Statistics Canada information by the University of Toronto. 46% of people in Nunavut live in food insecure households, and over 22% in the Northwest Territories, Madam Speaker. This is a major affordability crisis. And what's the government doing about it? Of course, they're making it worse with their inflationary policies and with their high taxes. But they have supposedly been aiming to address this through Nutrition North Canada, which is one of their flagship programs to address food insecurity in the North, Madam Speaker. And every single year, the government has been increasing funding to Nutrition North Canada. Back in 2021, they announced $163 million over 3 years to expand Nutrition North Canada. Every year the money goes up, but every year the rates of food insecurity go up, Madam Speaker. They're spending more, but getting worse results year after year, driving up the cost of living for people in the North. And that's a major issue. Clearly the program is not working. as my colleague before me mentioned, the Nutrition North Canada is not going to solve the affordability crisis when it comes to groceries across northern Canada. And there's really a number of reasons for that the report highlights. One of them, and this struck me, Madam Speaker, when I was working previously on the Indigenous and Northern Affairs Committee, the mandate of the program itself isn't even to address food security. That's something that we learned from the officials, Madam Speaker. Nutrition North Canada, the mandate was not to address food security. It doesn't make any sense. Why would that program exist, Madam Speaker? It's a subsidy. It's going to the retailers. There's a lot of concerns with the transparency of that. There are concerns that it hasn't been opened up to agricultural producers, that there hasn't been enough support for local harvesting or the ability for food to be processed in the north as well, Madam Speaker. It's a very narrow scope, and the government continues to add more and more money into this program that is not working. Unfortunately, that is a common trend that we see with this government. We see it in Nutrition North, we see it in Indigenous Services Canada, which the government often boasts about the fact that they've dramatically increased the funding to Indigenous Services Canada, Madam Speaker, but we've seen PBO reports and Auditor General reports that highlight that this spending has not actually led to an increased ability of ISC, Indigenous Services Canada, to achieve their departmental results. It's why a number of boil water advisories continue to exist in northwestern Ontario and across the country, and it's why it's why we're seeing over and over again with this government a focus on announcements and photo ops and money that they could send to the bureaucracy instead of doing the real work to ensure that it's getting to the people that need it. And Indigenous Services Canada, Madam Speaker, something that's really concerning to me is that in the last year, through an answer to an order paper question, we found that 94% of executive staff at Indigenous Services Canada received massive bonuses, totaling over $3.6 million. Madam Speaker, they're failing to meet their targets. They're failing to deliver adequate services to Indigenous people across the country, and they're getting rewarded with bonuses. It's a slap in the face to Indigenous peoples across the country, including in the north, that are struggling to get by. I'm sure the 42 chiefs in my riding and many across the north could certainly have come up with a better use for that $3.6 million than to go to the bureaucracy and bloat the pockets of those executive staff. It's completely unacceptable. But that's what we get after 8 years of this NDP-Liberal government, Madam Speaker. More spending, leading to higher inflation, the carbon tax that is driving up the cost of living on everyone. And it's not just food that it's impacting. Of course, we're speaking about food security with this report, Madam Speaker, but it's energy as well. 1 in 5 Canadian families are now living in energy poverty. I don't have a statistic for the north off the top of my head, Madam Speaker, but I'm sure common sense would indicate that that would be even higher in the north, where it becomes even more expensive and even more necessary to have home heating, obviously, and to have that use of energy. Madam Speaker, it doesn't seem like this government gets it. They don't understand the pain that their policies are inflicting on people across the country, and in particular in the north. Either that or maybe they just don't care, Madam Speaker. But either way, it's clear that it's time for a common sense Conservative government that's going to axe the tax to make life more affordable, to make food more affordable for people across the north, to listen to people living in the north, to ensure that we can provide the services that are needed in an efficient manner, to work towards building economic opportunities that can lead to self-determination and ensure that everyone can live in a food-secure household. Thank you, Madam Speaker.